The contract was written in 3 languages, and Kiran Drake should have insisted on reading all 3 versions before signing his name at the bottom. Instead, he had nodded along as the clan translator, an elderly orc woman with more enthusiasm than accuracy, gestured at the parchment and explained something about trade routes, caravan protection, and an alliance that would secure safe passage through the mountain passes for the next 5 years. Kiran had built his reputation as a fair trader across the frontier territories, hauling goods between human settlements and the scattered orc clans who controlled the high country, and this seemed like the logical next step in expanding his business. The meeting had taken place in a stone hall that smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs, with a dozen clan elders seated in a semicircle around a central fire, their tusked faces solemn and dignified in the flickering light. He had felt honored, if truth be told, that they trusted him enough to formalize their relationship with written terms. He had signed with a flourish, accepted a cup of bitter ceremonial wine, and smiled as the elders stood and clasped his forearm in the traditional gesture of binding agreement. It was only when a young orc woman was led into the hall, her face pale beneath her green skin and her dark eyes wide with something between shock and terror, that Kiran realized he might have made a terrible mistake. She was perhaps 20, slender and athletic in build, with black hair braided in intricate patterns down her back and small tusks that barely protruded past her lower lip. She wore a formal robe of deep crimson embroidered with silver thread, the kind of garment that spoke of ceremony and significance, and her hands were shaking as an older orc woman guided her toward the fire. The elders were smiling now, a warmth in their expressions that had not been there during the contract negotiation, and the translator was speaking rapidly in the clan tongue, gesturing between Kiran and the young woman with evident satisfaction. "What is happening?" Kiran asked slowly, setting down his cup and rising to his feet. "Who is this?" The translator turned to him with a broad smile that revealed her own considerable tusks. "This is Sera Lokran, the daughter of our clan chief, your bride as the contract states. The alliance is sealed through marriage, as is our custom when a bond is made with an outsider of status and honor." The words hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. "My what?" Sera's dark eyes met his across the fire, and in that instant, Kiran saw everything he needed to understand. She had not chosen this. She had been told, as he had just been told, that her life had been decided by words on parchment and customs she could not refuse. There was no joy in her expression, no eager anticipation of a wedding night or a shared future. There was only resignation and a flicker of desperate hope that perhaps this bewildered human trader might somehow be better than whatever alternative she had been facing. And in that moment, as illogical and impossible as it seemed, Kiran felt something crack open in his chest. She was beautiful, yes, but it was not merely her appearance that struck him. It was the way she held herself with dignity even as her world tilted on its axis. The way her jaw was set in determination not to weep or beg. The way her fingers curled into her palms as though she could hold onto her composure through sheer force of will. He had been alone for a long time, married to his trade routes and his solitary camps, and he had told himself he preferred it that way after losing the woman he had once hoped to marry to her father's debts and a merchant's cruel bargain. But looking at Sera now, he felt the old ache of that failure twist into something new and urgent. "There has been a misunderstanding," Kiran said carefully, still looking at Sera rather than the translator. "I came here to negotiate a trade contract, not a marriage." The translator frowned and consulted with the elders in rapid, clipped sentences. One of the older males, his face weathered and scarred from decades of hard living, leaned forward and spoke at length. The translator nodded and turned back to Kiran. "There is no misunderstanding. The contract you signed is a marriage alliance. You agreed to take Sera Lokran as your wife, to protect her and provide for her. And in return, the clan grants you exclusive trading rights through our territories and our protection on the mountain roads. This is a great honor. You are now son of the clan by law and custom." Kiran's mind raced, sorting through the implications. He was a careful man, methodical and deliberate in his dealings, and he did not panic easily, but this was beyond anything he had prepared for. "If I may ask, who was the original intended husband? Why was I not told clearly that this was a marriage contract?" The translator hesitated, glancing at the elders. Another long conversation followed, this one more heated, with several voices rising in what sounded like disagreement. Finally, the translator sighed and answered. "The original arrangement was with the son of Warlord Grath, who controls the eastern passes. His name is Vorak, and he is known for his cruelty. The clan elders agreed to the match because they feared Grath would close the passes and starve us out if we refused. But the contract stated that any man of standing who signed could claim the alliance in place of Vorak, provided it was done before the wedding day. We believed you understood this when you signed. The words are clear in our tongue, but not in mine," Kiran said quietly. He looked at Sera again and saw that she was watching him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. She understood the human language then, even if she did not speak it freely. "You were being married off to a warlord's son against your will." Sera's lips tightened, and she gave a single, barely perceptible nod. "And now, through my ignorance, I have taken his place." Another nod, this one accompanied by a flicker of something in her eyes that might have been gratitude or might have been merely exhaustion. Kiran could have walked away. He could have argued that a contract signed under false pretenses was not binding, could have demanded that they release him from an obligation he had never intended to accept. He was a trader, not a warrior, and he had no particular desire to tangle with a warlord's son or become embroiled in clan politics. But even as these thoughts flickered through his mind, he knew what he was going to do. He had failed once before, years ago, when the woman he loved had been sold to a merchant to pay her father's gambling debts, and he had been too young and too poor to offer an alternative. He had watched her go with hatred burning in his throat, and had sworn that, if he ever had the power to prevent such a thing again, he would not hesitate. He had built his business since then with that vow in the back of his mind, earning enough wealth and respect that he would never be powerless again. And now here was a chance to make good on that promise, even if the woman in question was a stranger and an orc, and someone he had no rational reason to protect. "Then it seems the contract is binding," Kiran said slowly, watching Sera's face as he spoke. "I will honor it if the clan and Sera herself are willing." The translator looked startled, as though she had expected him to protest further. "You agree to the marriage, even knowing it was not your intent when you signed." "I agree," Kiran said, and felt a strange sense of rightness settle over him even as the practical part of his mind screamed that he was a fool. "Though I would ask to speak with Sera privately, to ensure this is acceptable to her as well." The elders conferred again, and the scarred one who seemed to lead the group nodded slowly. "It is unusual, but we will allow it. You are now betrothed by law. A conversation between intended spouses is not improper. You will have 1 hour before the formal announcement is made." Sera finally spoke, her voice low and slightly rough, as though she did not use the human tongue often. "Come, we can speak in the garden." She turned and walked toward a side door without waiting to see if he would follow. Kiran exchanged a glance with the translator, who gave him an encouraging nod, and then he followed Sera out into the evening air. The garden was a small courtyard enclosed by stone walls, with a few hardy shrubs and a stone bench beside a trickling fountain. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the air was cool and smelled of pine. Sera stood with her back to him for a long moment, her shoulders rigid, and then she turned to face him. "You are either very brave or very stupid," she said bluntly. "Vorak will not accept this. He will come and he will demand satisfaction." "I am probably both," Kiran admitted, moving closer but stopping a respectful distance away. "But I could not walk away and leave you to marry a man known for cruelty. Not when I have the power to prevent it, even accidentally." Sera studied him with dark, searching eyes. "You do not know me. Why would you do this?" Kiran hesitated, trying to find words for a feeling that was still half-formed and tangled with old grief. "Because once, a long time ago, I failed to help someone in a similar situation. I was young and powerless then, but I am neither of those things now. And because when I looked at you across that fire, I saw someone who deserved better than to be traded like a sack of grain to secure a mountain pass. That is all I am to my clan," Sera said bitterly. "A useful commodity. My father loves me, I think, but not enough to refuse Grath's offer." "Then your father is a fool," Kiran said quietly, "though I suppose I should be grateful for his poor judgment since it has led me to you." Sera blinked, clearly not expecting that response. A faint flush of darker green spread across her cheeks. "You cannot mean that. You are trapped in this as much as I am." "I signed the contract willingly, even if I did not understand what I was signing," Kiran said. "And now that I do understand, I am choosing to honor it. That is not the same as being trapped. You have only seen me for a moment. You do not know if I am cruel or kind, clever or foolish, worth protecting or not." Kiran smiled slightly. "I know you stood in that hall with dignity even though you were afraid. I know you spoke honestly to me just now instead of pretending to be pleased with this arrangement. I know you have the courage to question a stranger's motives instead of simply accepting whatever you are told. That is enough for me to believe you are worth knowing better." Sera looked away, and he saw her jaw clench as though she was fighting some strong emotion. "Vorak will challenge you. Under clan law, if a marriage alliance is contested, the two claimants must face each other in a trial of strength. It is usually a duel." "I am not much of a fighter," Kiran admitted. "I know how to defend myself on the road, but I am no warrior. If it comes to a duel, I will likely lose." "Then you will die for nothing," Sera said, her voice rough. "Vorak is a trained killer. He has fought in raids since he was old enough to lift a blade. You would be slaughtered." "Perhaps," Kiran said, "but I would rather die trying to protect you than live knowing I walked away when I could have helped. That is the truth, Sera. I am not a hero, and I am not doing this to impress anyone. I am doing it because I have to, because of who I am and what I have lived through. If that makes me a fool, so be it." Sera turned back to him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I do not understand you, Kiran Drake. You are the strangest man I have ever met." "I will take that as a compliment," Kiran said and took a step closer. "May I ask you a question now?" "You may ask." "If you could choose freely, with no clan obligations or warlord threats or accidental contracts, what would you want for your life?" Sera stared at him, and he saw the question had caught her completely off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then looked away again. "No one has ever asked me that." "Then it is past time someone did." She was silent for a long time, and Kiran waited patiently, watching the play of fading light across her face. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I would want to be valued for more than my father's name and my potential to bear children." I would want to be seen as a person, not a bargaining chip. I would want to choose my own path, even if it was a difficult one. And I would want to be loved, truly loved, by someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. She laughed, a bitter sound. But those are childish dreams. The world does not work that way. It could, Kiran said quietly, if we decided it should. Sera looked at him again, and this time the tears spilled over, tracking down her green cheeks. You are going to break my heart, Kiran Drake. I can feel it already. I hope not, Kiran said, and found that he meant it more deeply than he had ever meant anything in his life. I would rather spend whatever time we have building something worth keeping, even if it started as an accident. Sera wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so simple and human that it made Kiran's chest ache. Then we are both fools, I think, but perhaps it is better to be fools together than wise and alone. I will agree to that, Kiran said, and held out his hand. After a moment, Sera took it, her palm warm and calloused against his. They stood like that as the last light faded from the sky, two people bound by accident and choice in equal measure, and Kiran felt the weight of his decision settle into certainty. He had fallen for her in that first moment across the fire, and now he was committed to seeing where that fall would lead them. The formal announcement was made that evening in the great hall, with the entire clan assembled to witness. Sera stood beside Kiran, her hand resting lightly on his arm, and they were presented as betrothed under clan law. There was cheering and the ritual drinking of more bitter wine, and Kiran was officially welcomed as son of the clan with a ceremony that involved a great deal of smoke and chanting. Through it all, Sera remained close to his side, and he noticed that her hand, though light, never left his arm, as though she was anchoring herself to him against the uncertainty of what would come next. It was 3 days before the warlord's son arrived, and when he came, he brought a warband of 20 orcs armed and armored for battle. Vorak was a towering figure, easily a head taller than Kiran and twice as broad, with scars crisscrossing his face and arms that spoke of countless fights survived. He wore black leather armor studded with iron, and a massive axe hung across his back. His eyes, when they fixed on Kiran, were cold and flat, the eyes of a man who killed without hesitation or remorse. The clan elders received Vorak in the great hall with wary courtesy. Sera's father, Chief Sera Lokran, was a grizzled orc with silver streaking his dark hair and a face that might have been kind once, but had been hardened by years of difficult decisions. He stood at the center of the semicircle of elders, his expression neutral, as Vorak strode into the hall and stopped before the fire. I have come for what was promised to me, Vorak said, his voice a deep rumble that carried to every corner of the hall. The alliance between our clans, sealed through marriage to Sera Lokran. I am told that a human traitor has attempted to take my place. This is an insult that cannot be allowed to stand. Chief Dorak inclined his head. The contract was signed according to our laws. Kiran Drake is now betrothed to my daughter. The alliance stands, but with a different partner than originally planned. Vorak's lip curled. A human. You would give your daughter to a weak, soft human rather than honor your agreement with my father. I would honor the law, Dorak said firmly. The contract allowed for substitution if another claimant of status signed before the wedding day. Kiran Drake signed. He is therefore the rightful husband. He signed through trickery and deceit, Vorak snarled. He did not understand what he was agreeing to. Such a contract is void. Kiran, standing beside Sera at the edge of the hall, felt her stiffen. He kept his voice calm and steady as he spoke. I signed in good faith, and I have chosen to honor the contract now that I understand its terms. There was no trickery on my part, only misunderstanding that has since been resolved. Vorak turned his cold gaze on Kiran. Then you are a fool as well as a weakling. You think you can take what is mine and face no consequences. Sera was never yours, Kiran said quietly. She is not property to be claimed. The hall went very still. Vorak's eyes narrowed and his hand moved to the axe at his back. You dare to challenge me, human. I dare to speak the truth, Kiran said, and I dare to stand by the contract I signed, regardless of your threats. Vorak smiled, a terrible expression that held no warmth. Then I invoke the right of trial. Under clan law, when a marriage alliance is contested, the two claimants must face each other to prove their worthiness. I challenge you, Kiran Drake. We will duel at dawn, and the victor will claim Sera Lokran as his bride. The elders murmured among themselves. Chief Dorak looked troubled but nodded slowly. The law is clear. If you wish to invoke the right of trial, Vorak, it cannot be denied. Kiran Drake, do you accept the challenge? Kiran felt Sera's hand tighten on his arm, her fingers digging in with painful intensity. He knew what accepting meant. He had no illusions about his chances against a trained warrior like Vorak. But refusing would mean abandoning Sera to a man who saw her as nothing more than a trophy, and that was something he could not do, no matter the cost. I accept, Kiran said, and heard Sera draw in a sharp breath beside him. Vorak laughed, a harsh bark of sound. Excellent. I will enjoy teaching you the price of your arrogance, human. At dawn, then, be ready to die. He turned and strode from the hall, his warband following. The moment the doors closed behind them, the hall erupted in conversation, voices raised in concern and speculation. Sera pulled at Kiran's arm, dragging him toward a side door and out into the corridor beyond. She did not stop until they were in a small, empty room lit by a single oil lamp, and then she turned on him with fury blazing in her eyes. How could you accept? She demanded, her voice shaking. You said yourself you are no warrior. Vorak will kill you, Kiran. He will cut you down without mercy, and I will be forced to marry him anyway, and you will be dead for nothing. Not for nothing, Kiran said gently, reaching out to cup her face in his hands. For you. Because you matter, Sera, more than you have been allowed to believe. I am not worth dying for, Sera said, tears streaming down her face now. We have known each other for 3 days. You cannot possibly care enough to throw your life away for me. And yet I do, Kiran said. I cannot explain it rationally. I only know that when I look at you, I see someone I want to protect, someone I want to know, someone I am already beginning to care for more than is sensible or safe. If that is foolishness, I will be a fool, but I will not walk away. Sera closed her eyes and a sob shook her shoulders. I do not want you to die. Please, Kiran, there must be another way. Then help me find it, Kiran said. You know your clan's laws better than I do. Is there any other option besides the duel? Sera opened her eyes and he saw her mind working behind the tears. There are old customs, older than the trial by combat, but they have not been used in generations. I do not even know if the elders would honor them. Tell me, Kiran urged. There is a law that predates the warlord alliances, from a time when our clans were smaller and more egalitarian. It says that a woman of the clan has the right to choose her own husband if she can prove that her choice serves the clan's welfare better than the alternative. It was meant to prevent women from being forced into marriages that would harm the clan. But it requires evidence and argument before the full council of elders, not just the marriage council. And it requires the woman herself to speak, to advocate for her choice. Most women are too frightened or too conditioned to obedience to use it. But you are not most women, Kiran said. You could argue your case. You could prove that marrying me serves the clan better than marrying Vorak. It would be difficult, Sera said slowly. Vorak brings military strength and his father's alliance. What do you bring that could compete with that? Trade, Kiran said immediately. Reliable access to goods from the human settlements, fair prices, and trade routes that do not depend on a warlord's whim. I have built relationships with a dozen clans and twice as many human merchants. I can bring prosperity without bloodshed, stability without fear. That is worth more than a warband in the long run. Sera stared at him, and slowly, hope began to kindle in her eyes. It might work. If I can convince the elders, if I can make them see that the old law still has power. But it is risky, Kiran. If the elders refuse to hear the case, the duel will proceed. And even if they agree to listen, Vorak will not accept the decision quietly. He may challenge the ruling itself. Then we will face that when it comes, Kiran said. But at least it gives us a chance. A better chance than I have with an axe in my hand at dawn. Sera managed a shaky laugh. That is certainly true. She reached up and covered his hands with hers, holding them against her face. You are the strangest, bravest man I have ever known, Kiran Drake. If I am to argue that marrying you serves the clan, I should be honest that it would serve me as well. I am beginning to care for you too, more than I expected, more than I thought possible in such a short time. Kiran felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. Then we are well matched in our foolishness. We are, Sera agreed, and leaned forward to press her forehead against his. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other, and then Sera straightened and wiped her eyes. Come, we must speak to my father and request a full council hearing. We have until dawn to make our case. The next several hours were a blur of hurried preparation. Chief Dorak, when presented with Sera's request, looked both surprised and impressed. I did not think you knew of that old law, he said, studying his daughter with something like pride. It has not been invoked in my lifetime. Then it is time to remember that our customs have depth and wisdom beyond what the warlords would prefer, Sera said firmly. I claim the right to choose my husband based on the welfare of the clan. I ask that the full council hear my argument. Dorak glanced at Kiran. And you support this? I do, Kiran said. I believe Sera has the right to choose, and I believe she can make a compelling case that our marriage serves the clan's interests. Dorak was silent for a long moment, and then he nodded. Very well. I will summon the full council. But you should know that not all the elders will be sympathetic. Some have already committed to supporting Vorak's father in other matters. They will not easily be swayed. I understand, Sera said, but I must try. The full council was larger than Kiran had expected, with nearly 30 elders crowded into the great hall. They represented not just the immediate clan, but also allied families and vassal groups, and their faces ranged from curious to hostile, as Sera stood before them with Kiran at her side. Vorak was also present, standing at the edge of the hall with his arms crossed and a sneer on his scarred face. Sera took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. Honored elders, I stand before you to invoke an ancient right, one that has been part of our law since before the warlord clans rose to power. I claim the right to choose my own husband based on the welfare of this clan, and I ask that you honor that choice. One of the older elders, a female with white hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. The right you speak of has not been used in generations, Sera Lokran. Why invoke it now? Because the choice before us is not merely a matter of honoring an alliance, Sera said. It is a matter of what kind of clan we wish to be, and what kind of future we wish to build. Vorak, son of warlord Grath, offers military strength and the protection of his father's warband, but that protection comes at a cost. Grath is known for his cruelty and his ambition. Aligning ourselves with him through marriage ties us to his conflicts, his enemies, and his ruthless methods. We will be drawn into raids and wars that serve his interests, not ours. We will become a vassal clan, dependent on his goodwill and subject to his demands. Murmurs ran through the council. Vorak's sneer deepened, but he did not interrupt. Sera continued, her voice growing stronger. Kiran Drake, on the other hand, offers something different. He offers trade, prosperity, and independence. He has built relationships across the frontier with human settlements and orc clans alike. He deals fairly, honors his contracts, and brings goods that improve our lives without demanding blood in return. Marrying him creates an alliance based on mutual benefit, not fear. It gives us access to trade routes and resources without binding us to a warlord's ambitions. It allows us to remain free and self-determining rather than becoming another weapon in Grath's arsenal. Pretty words, Vorak said, his voice dripping with contempt. But words do not defend a clan when enemies attack. This human cannot protect you. He is weak, and he will make you weak. Strength is not only measured in battle, Sera shot back. A clan that thrives through trade is stronger in the long run than a clan that survives through raids and bloodshed. Grath's enemies will become our enemies if I marry you, Vorak. How many of our young will die in his wars? How many families will mourn sons and daughters lost to conflicts that do not serve our interests? All clans face war, Vorak said. That is the nature of survival. Better to have a strong ally than a weak traitor who will abandon you when the fighting starts. I will not abandon anyone, Kiran said quietly, stepping forward. I have risked my life on the frontier roads for years. I know how to survive, and I know how to build alliances that last. I offer this clan not just trade goods but connections, relationships, and a network of support that extends across the territory. That is worth more than a warband, because it creates stability and prosperity that benefit everyone, not just the warriors. The sharp-eyed elder spoke again. You are eloquent, human, but how do we know you will honor your promises? You signed a contract without understanding it. That speaks of carelessness, if not worse. It speaks of trust, Kiran said. I trusted the clan to deal with me honorably, and I signed in good faith. When I learned the full terms, I chose to honor them rather than walk away. That is not carelessness. That is commitment. I am committing to Sera, to this clan, and to the alliance we can build together. I will not break that commitment, no matter the cost. Another elder, a scarred male who had been silent until now, spoke up. And what of Grath's response? If we refuse Vorak, the warlord will be angry. He may cut off the eastern passes or even attack us directly. He may, Sera said, but he will also know that we are not alone. Kiran's trade network includes other clans, some of whom are rivals to Grath. If we align ourselves with Kiran, we gain access to those connections. Grath will have to weigh the cost of attacking us against the risk of uniting his enemies. It is not a decision he will make lightly. Chief Dorak, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. My daughter makes a strong argument. The old law exists for precisely this reason, to allow our women to choose paths that serve the clan's welfare when the traditional alliance would cause more harm than good. I believe Sera has proven that marrying Kiran Drake offers benefits that outweigh the risks. I support her choice. Several other elders nodded in agreement, but not all. The debate continued for another hour, with arguments and counterarguments flying back and forth. Vorak grew increasingly agitated, his hand straying repeatedly to his axe, but he did not interrupt again. Finally, the sharp-eyed elder called for a vote. All in favor of honoring Sera Lokran's choice under the ancient rite, make it known. Slowly, hands rose around the circle. Kiran counted, his heart pounding. It was close, desperately close, but in the end, a narrow majority supported Sera's claim. The sharp-eyed elder nodded slowly. The council has spoken. Sera Lokran's choice is honored. She will marry Kiran Drake, and the alliance with warlord Grath through Vorak is dissolved. Vorak exploded with rage, drawing his axe and slamming it into the ground with a force that cracked the stone. This is an outrage. The law is being twisted to serve a coward and a traitor. I will not accept this. The law has been honored, Chief Dorak said firmly. You have no grounds to challenge it, Vorak. The council has voted. Then I challenge the council itself, Vorak snarled. This decision is a disgrace, and I will see it overturned by force if necessary. That would be rebellion against clan law, the sharp-eyed elder said coldly. And rebellion carries severe consequences. You would be wise to accept the council's decision and leave in peace. Vorak glared around the hall, his chest heaving with fury. For a moment, Kiran thought the orc would attack anyway, consequences be damned. But then Vorak seemed to master himself, wrenching his axe from the stone and sheathing it across his back. My father will hear of this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. And he will not forget the insult. You have made an enemy today, Chief Dorak. All of you have. He turned and stormed from the hall, his warband trailing after him. The doors slammed shut, and the silence that followed was heavy with tension. Chief Dorak sighed and rubbed his face with one hand. We have bought ourselves time, but Vorak spoke truth. Grath will not be pleased. We must be prepared for his response. Then we will prepare together, Kiran said. I will send word to my contacts, begin building the alliances we spoke of. If Grath threatens, he will find he is facing more than a single clan. Dorak looked at him for a long moment and then nodded. You have courage, Kiran Drake. I hope it is enough. He turned to Sera. You argued well, daughter. I am proud of you. Sera bowed her head, but Kiran saw the relief in her eyes. Thank you, father. The council dispersed slowly, elders stopping to speak with Kiran and Sera in turn. Some offered congratulations, others warnings, and a few simply looked troubled. By the time the hall emptied, Kiran felt drained, as though he had fought the duel with Vorak after all. Sera led him out into the courtyard garden where they had first spoken, and they sat together on the stone bench as the stars came out overhead. We did it, Sera said softly, leaning against his shoulder. I cannot quite believe it, but we did it. You did it, Kiran corrected. Your argument won the day. I merely stood beside you and looked earnest. Sera laughed, a genuine sound of joy that made Kiran's heart lift. You did more than that. You gave me the courage to try. Without you, I would have accepted my fate and married Vorak because I believed I had no other choice. You showed me that choices exist, even in the most constrained circumstances. I am glad, Kiran said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Though I confess I am also terrified. We have defied a warlord and upended clan politics. The consequences will be significant. They will, Sera agreed, but we will face them together. That makes all the difference. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Sera spoke again, her voice thoughtful. You said you failed to help someone once, long ago. Will you tell me about it? Kiran hesitated, old pain stirring in his chest. But Sera had been honest with him, and he owed her the same. Her name was Ilara. We grew up in the same village, and I loved her from the time we were children. She loved me too, or so I believed. But her father was a gambler, and he ran up debts he could not pay. A merchant from the city came to collect, and when the father could not pay in coin, the merchant demanded Ilara instead. She would work in his household, he said, as a servant. But we all knew what that meant. I was 18, too young and too poor to offer an alternative. I begged the merchant to take me instead, offered to work for him for as many years as it would take to clear the debt. He laughed and said a strong-backed boy was worth less than a pretty girl. They took her away, and I never saw her again. I heard years later that she had died of a fever in the merchant's house. She was 22. Sera's hand found his and squeezed tightly. I am so sorry, Kiran. That must have been unbearable. It was, Kiran said quietly. I swore then that I would never be powerless again. I threw myself into building my trade business, earning enough wealth and influence that I would have options if such a situation arose again. And then, when I met you, when I realized what I had accidentally walked into, I saw a chance to make good on that promise. I could not save Alara, but I could save you, or at least try. You did save me, Sera said, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me a choice and you stood by me when I made it. That is everything, Kiran, more than you know. Kiran turned to look at her, and in the starlight, her face was beautiful and fierce and full of a tenderness that made his breath catch. I have fallen for you, Sera Lokran. I know it is too soon, and I know we have only just begun to know each other, but it is the truth. I fell the moment I saw you across the fire, and every moment since has only made me more certain. Sera's eyes shone with tears, but she was smiling. Then we have fallen together because I feel the same. You are unlike anyone I have ever met, Kiran Drake. You are kind and brave and utterly impossible, and I am beginning to think I am the luckiest woman in the clan, despite everything. Kiran leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and tentative, and she kissed him back with a fierceness that spoke of relief and hope and the beginning of something neither of them had expected. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Kiran rested his forehead against hers. We still have to actually get married, he said, trying for levity. Under your clan's customs, properly this time. We do, Sera agreed. But first, we have to survive whatever Grath sends our way. Let us take this one step at a time. Agreed, Kiran said, and kissed her again, because he could, because she was his now by choice and by law, and because the future, however uncertain, felt suddenly full of possibility. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Kiran sent messages to every contact he had, calling in favors and building alliances with clans that had no love for warlord Grath. He negotiated trade agreements, offered favorable terms, and made it clear that supporting Sera's clan meant supporting a network of mutual benefit that extended across the territory. Slowly, carefully, he wove a web of connections that would make it costly for Grath to attack without risking his own position. It was delicate work, requiring diplomacy and patience, but Kiran had spent years honing those skills on the frontier roads, and he knew how to make people see the value in cooperation over conflict. Sera, meanwhile, worked with her father and the clan elders to strengthen their defenses and stockpile supplies in case Grath decided to lay siege or cut off the passes. She proved to be a skilled organizer, coordinating work parties and managing resources with a competence that impressed even the most skeptical elders. Kiran watched her with growing admiration and affection, seeing in her a strength that had been hidden beneath layers of resignation and fear. She bloomed in the freedom of having made her own choice, and he found himself falling deeper with each passing day. They spent their evenings together, walking in the garden or sitting by the fire in the great hall, talking about everything and nothing. Kiran told her about his childhood in a human village, his decision to become a trader, and the long, lonely years on the road. Sera told him about growing up as the chief's daughter, the weight of expectations, and the quiet rebellion of learning to read and write in the human tongue against her mother's wishes. They shared stories and laughter and silences that were comfortable rather than awkward, building a foundation of understanding and trust that went beyond the accidental contract that had brought them together. It was nearly a month before Grath's response arrived, and when it came, it was not in the form Kiran had expected. Instead of a warband, a single messenger rode into the clan's territory carrying a sealed letter. The messenger was an elderly orc, thin and unarmored, who presented the letter to Chief Dorak with a formal bow and then waited for a response. Dorak opened the letter and read it in silence, his expression growing darker with each line. Finally, he looked up and addressed the gathered elders. Grath demands compensation for the insult to his son. He says that if we refuse to honor the original marriage alliance, we must pay a penalty in gold and goods, or else face his warband in open conflict. He gives us 2 weeks to decide. The hall erupted in angry murmurs. The amount Grath demanded was exorbitant, far more than the clan could afford to pay without bankrupting themselves. It was a deliberate provocation, designed to force them into either submission or war. Kiran, standing beside Sera, felt anger rise in his throat. He is trying to corner us. He knows we cannot pay that amount, so he can claim we left him no choice but to attack. Exactly, Dorak said grimly. And his message makes it clear that he blames you, Kiran, for disrupting the alliance. If we hand you over to him, he will reduce the penalty significantly. Sera went rigid beside him. No, absolutely not. I will not allow it. Peace, daughter, Dorak said, raising a hand. I have no intention of handing Kiran over. I merely report what Grath has demanded, but we must decide how to respond. We respond by calling his bluff, Kiran said. I have spent the last month building alliances with other clans. If Grath attacks us, he will find himself facing not just one clan but a coalition. I have written assurances from 5 clans that they will come to our aid if we are attacked unjustly. Grath knows this, or he will soon. His demand for compensation is a way to save face, to extract something from the situation without committing to a costly war. Then we refuse the demand and dare him to attack, one of the elders asked, sounding skeptical. We refuse the demand, Kiran said, but we offer an alternative. We propose a trade agreement that benefits both sides, one that gives Grath access to goods and resources he wants without requiring a marriage alliance. We show him that cooperating with us is more profitable than fighting us. If he is as pragmatic as I believe, he will accept. Dorak considered this and then nodded slowly. It is a gamble, but I believe it is the right one. Draft your proposal, Kiran. We will send it with our response. Kiran worked through the night, drafting a detailed trade agreement that offered Grath significant benefits in exchange for leaving the clan in peace. He proposed exclusive access to certain goods, favorable rates, and a commitment to facilitate trade through the eastern passes without interference. It was a generous offer, one that would cost the clan less than Grath's demanded penalty, but still provide the warlord with tangible gains. By the time the sun rose, Kiran had a document he believed would work, and he presented it to Dorak and the council for approval. The council debated the proposal for hours, refining details and arguing over terms, but in the end, they agreed to send it. The messenger departed with both the refusal of Grath's demands and the alternative trade agreement, and then there was nothing to do but wait. Those 2 weeks were the longest of Kiran's life. He and Sera continued their preparations, but the tension was palpable. Warriors drilled in the training yard, scouts watched the passes, and every day felt like the calm before a storm. Kiran found himself waking in the night, heart pounding, imagining worst-case scenarios. But Sera was always there, a steady presence beside him, and her quiet confidence helped keep his fears at bay. Whatever happens, we face it together, she reminded him one night, holding his hand in the darkness. I chose you, Kiran. I will not regret that choice no matter the outcome. Nor will I, Kiran said, pulling her close. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, even if it started as an accident. Especially because it started as an accident, Sera said with a soft laugh. The gods have a sense of humor, I think. The response from Grath arrived on the 13th day, delivered by the same elderly messenger. This time, the letter was shorter, and Dorak read it aloud to the assembled clan. Warlord Grath has considered our proposal. He accepts the trade agreement, on the condition that it is formalized in writing and witnessed by neutral parties. He withdraws his demand for penalty and acknowledges that the marriage alliance is dissolved. He warns that any breach of the trade agreement will result in immediate retaliation, but he agrees to peace for now. The hall erupted in cheers and relieved laughter. Kiran felt the tension drain from his body, leaving him almost light-headed with relief. Sera threw her arms around him, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. "We did it," she said, clinging to him. "We actually did it." "You did it," Kiran said, setting her down but not letting go. "Your courage to choose to stand before the council and argue your case, that is what made this possible. I am so proud of you, Sera." "I could not have done it without you," Sera said, cupping his face in her hands. "You gave me the strength to try. We did this together, and we will build our future together too." Dorak approached them, a rare smile on his weathered face. "It seems your gamble paid off, Kiran Drake. You have proven yourself a valuable ally and a worthy husband for my daughter. The clan owes you a debt of gratitude." "I ask for no debt," Kiran said. "Only the chance to continue serving the clan and building a life with Sera." "That you shall have," Dorak said, and clapped Kiran on the shoulder with enough force to make him stagger. "Now, I believe we have a wedding to prepare. It is past time to formalize this union properly." The wedding was set for a week later, giving the clan time to prepare a proper celebration. It was to be conducted under the old customs, the ones Sera had invoked to claim her right to choose, and every member of the clan was invited to attend. Kiran found himself swept up in a flurry of preparations, learning rituals and customs he had never heard of, practicing words in the clan tongue that felt clumsy on his human tongue, and being fitted for ceremonial robes that felt strange and formal after years of practical traveling clothes. Sera was radiant, her nervousness buried under excitement and joy. She threw herself into the preparations with the same competence she had shown in organizing the clan's defenses, coordinating decorations and food and music with tireless energy. Kiran watched her with a mixture of awe and affection, marveling at how much she had changed in the short time since they had met. She was no longer the resigned, frightened young woman who had stood in the great hall expecting to be married off to a cruel stranger. She was confident, capable, and fully alive, and he felt humbled and honored that she had chosen him. The night before the wedding, they walked together in the garden one last time as an unbonded couple. The air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming flowers, and the stars were bright overhead. They sat on their usual bench, and Sera leaned against his shoulder with a contented sigh. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," Kiran admitted. "Not of marrying you, but of the ceremony itself. I am afraid I will mispronounce something or trip over my own feet or otherwise embarrass myself in front of the entire clan." Sera laughed. "You will be fine, and even if you do stumble, it will be endearing. Everyone already loves you, Kiran. You have won their respect and their affection through your actions. A few clumsy words will not change that." "I hope you are right," Kiran said, and then added more quietly, "I still cannot believe this is real, that you are real, that we are actually doing this." "I feel the same," Sera said. "Sometimes I wake up and think it must have been a dream, that I will open my eyes and find myself back in that hall, waiting to be handed over to Vorak. And then I remember that you are here, that you chose to stay, and I know it is real." "I will always choose to stay," Kiran said, turning to face her. "I meant what I said weeks ago, Sera. I have fallen for you deeply and completely. You are my future, the person I want to build a life with. I am not afraid of that. I am only afraid of failing you." "You will not fail me," Sera said fiercely. "You have already proven that. You stood by me when you had every reason to walk away. You fought for me, not with weapons but with words and courage and determination. You gave me the freedom to choose, and then you honored that choice. You are everything I hoped for and so much more, Kiran Drake. I am the one who is afraid of failing you." "Impossible," Kiran said and kissed her, slow and deep, pouring all his love and commitment into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, and Sera rested her forehead against his. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Tomorrow we speak the vows, and it becomes real and binding and forever." "I cannot wait," Kiran said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the sky a flawless blue that seemed to promise good fortune. The ceremony was to take place in a sacred grove just outside the clan's main settlement, a place of ancient trees and moss-covered stones that the clan had used for important rituals since time immemorial. Kiran arrived early, dressed in the ceremonial robes of deep blue, embroidered with silver thread that matched the design of Sera's betrothal robe. He felt awkward and out of place, but Chief Dorak stood beside him with a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and the gathered clan members greeted him with warm smiles and words of encouragement. When Sera arrived, Kiran forgot how to breathe. She wore a gown of deep green that brought out the richness of her skin, with silver and gold embroidery that caught the light and made her seem to glow. Her hair was unbound, flowing down her back in dark waves, and a circlet of flowers rested on her head. She walked toward him with her father on one side and her mother on the other, and her eyes never left his face. The ceremony itself was conducted by the eldest of the clan's shamans, a venerable orc woman whose voice was thin with age but still carried power and authority. She spoke of the old ways, of the bond between two people who chose each other freely and committed to building a life together. She invoked blessings from the spirits of earth and sky, asked for protection and prosperity, and then turned to Kiran and Sera. "Kiran Drake, you stand before this clan as an outsider who has become one of us through deed and choice. Do you swear to honor Sera Lokran, to protect and provide for her, to stand by her in times of hardship and joy, to cherish her as your partner and your equal?" Kiran's voice was steady as he answered, the words he had practiced until they were second nature. "I swear it, before this clan and before the spirits, with all my heart and all my strength." The shaman turned to Sera. "Sera Lokran, you stand before this clan as a daughter who has claimed her right to choose. Do you swear to honor Kiran Drake, to stand by him in times of hardship and joy, to build a life with him as your partner and your equal, to bind your fate to his by your own free will?" Sera's voice rang out clear and strong. "I swear it, before this clan and before the spirits, with all my heart and all my soul. I choose him freely, and I will choose him every day for the rest of my life." The shaman smiled, her weathered face creasing with approval. "Then by the old laws and the customs of this clan, I declare you husband and wife, bound by choice and by oath. What has been joined here cannot be sundered by any force save your own wills. May your union bring strength to this clan and joy to your hearts." The clan erupted in cheers and applause, and Kiran pulled Sera into his arms, kissing her deeply while laughter and happy shouts echoed around them. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools, and Sera's eyes were bright with tears. "We did it," she said, her voice choked with emotion. We are married, truly married. We are, Kiran agreed, holding her close, and I could not be happier. The celebration that followed was a joyous blur of feasting and music and dancing. Long tables had been set up in the grove, laden with roasted meats and fresh bread and vegetables from the clan's gardens. There was wine and ale and a potent spirit that the orcs called firewater, and Kiran was pressed to drink far more of it than was wise. Sera stayed by his side, laughing and accepting congratulations from clan members who stopped by to offer blessings and well wishes. The sun set and torches were lit, and the music grew louder and more energetic, and Kiran found himself pulled into dances that he did not know but tried to follow anyway, stumbling and laughing and thoroughly enjoying himself. Late in the evening, as the celebration finally began to wind down, and the younger children were carried off to bed by tired parents, Sera took Kiran's hand and led him away from the grove, back toward the settlement. They walked in comfortable silence, both pleasantly tired and content, until they reached the small house that had been prepared for them, a new dwelling built on the edge of the settlement with a view of the mountains. It was simple but sturdy, with a main room, a sleeping chamber, and a small kitchen, and Sera had filled it with personal touches over the past week, small decorations and comforts that made it feel like a home rather than just a structure. They stood together in the doorway, looking out at the starlit night, and Kiran wrapped his arms around Sera from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For choosing me. For giving me a chance. For being brave enough to claim your right and argue your case in front of the council. For making me the happiest man alive." Sera turned in his arms and kissed him, gentle and sweet. "I should be thanking you. You gave me my life back, Kiran. You gave me freedom and choice and love. You are a gift I never expected and will never take for granted." "Then we are even," Kiran said, and lifted her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold as she laughed and clung to his neck. He set her down in the main room and closed the door behind them, shutting out the world and leaving only the two of them in the warm, firelit space. They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that spoke of all the emotion they had been holding back, all the fear and hope and love that had built between them over the past weeks. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the soft bed, Sera's head resting on Kiran's chest as his fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "I love you," Sera said softly, the words simple but weighted with meaning. "I did not think I would ever be able to say that to someone and mean it the way I mean it now, but I do. I love you, Kiran Drake, with everything I am." "I love you too," Kiran said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought possible. You are my heart, Sera Lokran, my home." "Sera Drake now," she corrected with a smile, "if we are following human custom." "Sera Drake," Kiran repeated, tasting the name. "I like it, though Sera Lokran is equally beautiful." "Then I will be both," Sera decided. "Sera Lokran Drake. A bridge between our peoples, as our marriage is a bridge." "I like that even better," Kiran said, and kissed the top of her head. They drifted off to sleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, the future stretching out before them full of promise and possibility. The months that followed were busy and challenging, but also deeply fulfilling. Kiran resumed his trading routes, but now with Sera by his side, and together they traveled across the frontier, strengthening the alliances Kiran had built and forging new ones. Sera proved to be a natural diplomat, her directness and honesty winning respect from both orc clans and human settlements. They made a formidable team, and their reputation grew as fair dealers who could be trusted to honor their commitments and mediate disputes with wisdom and patience. The trade agreement with Warlord Grath held. though there were occasional tensions and misunderstandings that required careful negotiation to resolve. Grath never forgave the insult to his son, but he was pragmatic enough to recognize that the trade relationship benefited him more than war would, and he kept his word. Vorak, for his part, disappeared from the region, rumored to have gone south to seek glory in the warlord raids along the coast. Kiran did not mourn his absence. Sera's clan thrived under the new alliances, their prosperity growing as trade brought goods and resources that had once been scarce. Chief Dorak, seeing the benefits of the approach Kiran and Sera had pioneered, began encouraging other clans to follow suit, and slowly, the culture of raiding and conflict that had dominated the frontier for generations began to shift toward cooperation and mutual benefit. It was a slow process, fraught with setbacks and resistance from those who clung to the old ways, but it was happening, and Kiran and Sera were at the heart of it. By the end of the first year, Sera was pregnant, and the news filled both of them with a joy that was almost overwhelming. Kiran found himself thinking constantly about the child they would raise together, the family they would build, and the world they were helping to create for the next generation. He was present for every moment of Sera's pregnancy, attentive and supportive, and when their daughter was born on a cold winter night, he wept with relief and happiness as he held the tiny, squalling bundle in his arms. They named her Fela, a name that meant hope in the clan tongue but also strength, and she was perfect, with her mother's green skin and dark hair and her father's blue eyes. Sera recovered quickly from the birth, her natural resilience serving her well, and within weeks she was back on her feet, determined not to let motherhood slow her down. Kiran marveled at her strength and adaptability, and he threw himself into fatherhood with the same commitment he brought to everything else, learning to change swaddling cloths and soothe a crying baby, and function on far less sleep than he had ever thought possible. Fela grew quickly, a bright and curious child who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both her parents. She had Sera's directness and determination, but also Kiran's patience and thoughtfulness, and she was adored by everyone in the clan. Chief Dorak, now a grandfather, doted on her shamelessly, and Sera's mother, who had initially been skeptical of the human son-in-law, became one of Kiran's staunchest supporters. 2 years later, Sera gave birth to a son, and they named him Rylan, a strong, masculine name that spoke of protection and loyalty. Rylan was a quieter child than his sister, more inclined to watch and listen than to charge ahead, but he had a gentle kindness that melted hearts. Kiran watched his children grow with a sense of profound gratitude, knowing that they represented the future he and Sera had fought so hard to build, a future where orc and human could live and love and raise families together without fear or prejudice. As the years passed, the changes they had helped set in motion spread across the frontier. More clans began trading instead of raiding, and more humans and orcs formed partnerships and friendships that crossed the old divides. It was not a perfect transformation, and there were still those who resisted, who clung to hatred and suspicion, but the tide was turning, and Kiran and Sera were proud to be part of that change. One evening, nearly 5 years after their wedding, they sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains while Fela and Rylan played in the yard. Sera leaned against Kiran's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, both of them content in the quiet companionship that came from years of shared life and love. "You ever think about that day in the Great Hall?" Sera asked. "When you signed the contract without understanding it?" "All the time," Kiran said with a smile. "It was the best mistake I ever made." "It was not a mistake," Sera said firmly. "It was fate. The gods brought us together even if they had to use a botched translation and a confusing contract to do it. Then I am grateful to the gods, Kiran said, kissing her temple. And to you, for choosing to take a chance on an accidental husband. You were never accidental, Sera said, turning to look at him with warmth and love shining in her dark eyes. You were exactly what I needed, even if I did not know it at the time. You gave me freedom, and then you gave me love, and you have given me a life beyond anything I ever dreamed possible. I would choose you 1,000 times over, Kiran Drake. And I would choose you, Kiran said, his voice thick with emotion. Every time in every world I would choose you. They kissed as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and their children laughed in the yard, and the world they had built together felt solid and real and endlessly worth every risk they had taken. Kiran had rescued Sera from an arranged marriage by accidentally becoming the arrangement, but in the end, they had rescued each other, finding in their accidental union a love that was deliberate, deep, and enduring. And as the stars came out overhead, and Sera rested her head on his shoulder, and Fela called out for them to watch her latest acrobatic feat, Kiran knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, with exactly the person he was meant to be with, living the life he had been meant to find. It had started with a contract he could not read, and a woman he did not know, but it had become everything he had ever wanted and more, a testament to the power of choice and courage, and the kind of love that grows from the most unlikely beginnings into something beautiful and unbreakable. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge, but Kiran and Sera faced them together, as partners and equals, building a legacy that would echo through generations. Their children grew strong and kind, inheriting the best of both their heritages, and the clan they called home thrived under the new ways they had helped pioneer. And through it all, the accidental arrangement that had brought them together remained the foundation of everything they built, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come not from careful planning, but from the willingness to embrace the unexpected and make something beautiful from the chaos. In the end, it was not the contract that bound them, but the choice they made every day to honor their vows, to love each other fiercely, and to build a future that honored both their pasts. Kiran had rescued Sera from a fate she did not choose, and in doing so, he had found his own rescue, his own home, his own heart. And that, he thought as he held her close under the stars, was the truest magic of all.